we got it to the point to where like I was supposed to talk to his manager or something like that because apparently they have a manager. I didn't think that a beatdown band from the UK would have a manager, but I mean, whatever. Um, yeah, I got two.
Oh, my
So
man's double fisting. You know, someone has come prepared to this podcast if they have two bevs in hand.
yeah, I mean, I'm a security guard overnight, so like my sleep schedule's reversed, so I gotta have caffeine when I wake up at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
Right. Yeah, that's
So
fair. No, that's awesome.
mm,
Well, I think we are good to go if you are my guy.
yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. We're back down in Texas to be chatting with some homies from down there. I have Gabe from the band Belligerence on the show today. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. I've seen a lot of your stuff and a lot of the interviews with some of the American bands that you've spoken to, and like I know a couple of those dudes. I've spoken with the guys from 30 Nights of Violence a lot. Like they fuck with my band, and our guitarist is from Tennessee, so he's
Oh,
like
okay,
familiar
cool.
with them and Orthodox. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's been it's been pretty surreal, just the overall adapting this podcast to be online, especially when COVID hit, and the fact that now I can just literally send a Zoom link and I can be chatting with someone from a totally different part of the world is very, very sick. So yeah, I'm excited to be chatting with you today. Obviously we'll be chatting about some things going on with Belligerence. Before we get super into it, can you give a proper introduction, your name, what you do in the band, and where you're based?
yeah, for sure. I'm Gabriel Walker, soon to be Gabe Mayberry. I'm changing my last name because I'm adopted and I want to go back to my birth name. I'm the vocalist of Belligerence. I'm also the founder of Belligerence, and we're based out of South Austin in Texas. So like down in like the Riverside area.
Cool. Yeah. Texas has is a part of the I guess the North American sphere of hardcore that I feel like is very, very underrated as far as the number of different bands that are coming out of that pocket. So I'm excited to be kind of talking about Texas things and things like that. We kind of touched on it a little bit before we got officially going, but we got to do the bev check. Since you brought two to the table, how about you go first, and I'll just
Okay.
I'll let the guests start off.
I got my Quake Classic Zero Energy. It's not the one I like, but I grabbed it. I recommend the berry one. And then I got an Austin, Texas based sparkling water called Waterloo, and it's the coconut flavor.
Interesting.
So
Okay. So
yeah.
For me, both bevs, never seen those before. So Quake is an energy drink. That's what you were saying. Yeah.
It's a relatively new one too. Like it just hit the shelves this year. It's not as caffeinated as like a Bang or a Rain, but and it doesn't taste as harsh either. It's like a much more relaxed, lightly carbonated drink. So I prefer that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I literally had a podcast just before you, and she was talking about how she drank a Bang all in one go because she couldn't bring the drink into the show, and she was almost having a heart attack during one of the bands. So it's not Bangs aren't for the faint of heart for sure. And then the other one is called Waterloo, which is interesting.
Yeah, which is like the original name of Austin from back in the day. From back in like like pre-modern era, I suppose. I don't really know what to call it. Like a whole bunch of like record stores and like clothing shops and stuff are called like Waterloo Records or Waterloo Clothing and all this other stuff. So yeah, I think there's also a Waterloo Brewery, if I'm not mistaken.
That's interesting for me being a Canadian, because in the Ontario, Toronto area, there is a town called Waterloo, and I have family in that area. So I was like, what the hell is going on there? So that is interesting that in a totally different part of the world that also had a name, a past name, if anything. So
Yeah, I think there's also like a Waterloo somewhere on the East Coast that's related to like some colonial era town or something like that. Don't quote me on this though. I haven't like looked at a textbook in
Yeah,
forever.
this is
So
not a geography podcast by any means. Well, Gabe, I'm excited to be chatting with you. Belligerence kind of came on my radar, kind of in a kind of weird way. I don't know if it was you or someone else in the band, but uh, the Belligerence Bandcamp, when you guys dropped your latest release, just dropped it on the Calgary Hardcore page, and I it's kind of funny because sometimes that's very hit or miss. I feel like when you're just
yeah,
doing the going to all these different Facebook groups and doing that. But I was like, I'm gonna check this out. Like I'm always on the hunt for new music, and I was actually like pleasantly surprised. Like, whoa, this is like pretty sick. So yeah, that's how at least you guys came into, I guess, my hardcore world. But yeah, I've been kind of following what you guys have been doing, put you guys on a couple playlists. So definitely want to talk about that release. Before we get too into it, just let's talk a
sure.
little bit about you and the context about how you got into heavier music overall. So take me back in
For sure.
time and tell me about those things.
Real quick, what are you drinking? Because I know that's your thing.
Oh,
Is you
I
got to do
forgot.
yours.
Yeah, I was like, did I skip something?
We sidelined and we did my stuff because I went into a history
I was
lesson,
just
so I want to know what you're
I
drinking,
was
man.
so interested on what you have. Well, you're my second podcast of the day, so I kind
Okay.
of have to be strategic about I just can't be doing 3 energy drinks back to back because I will
Right.
literally like grow 2 extra arms and become a champ and start punching walls.
Hell yeah.
But I'm drinking my personal favorite sparkling water, which is a brand called Aha.
We
Um,
have those here. We have those here, and they come in tall boys like this. That flavor is my favorite one. It tastes like juice. It's like the most amazing sparkling water ever.
Yeah,
I
it
love it.
is. It's very weird because they hit the shelves in Canada, and we don't have the entire line because I think you guys have some flavors that I've never seen the light of day. But they were at my local co-op. Shout out to all the prairie grocery stores out there, but I haven't seen them in the last little bit, so I'm trying to. I might have to spend some of my time on my Christmas break just going to all these grocery stores just to find where I can this is my last aha in the fridge. And I wanted to crack it with someone special, obviously. So
Yeah.
um
Well, Edge juice
edge
break.
juice. So yeah, so as I said, give me some of the origins for getting into heavy music for you, and we'll kind of set the pace for the rest of the podcast here.
So I know like every kid nowadays is like, oh, new metal this, new metal that. And like that's cool that a lot of people are like being stands for new metal. But like my my first experience ever with heavy music, I remember being on like my daycare bus, I think like in kindergarten, and I was hearing Linkin Park on like my daycare bus because like my bus driver was like this redneck white lady who just didn't give a shit about anything, and she was playing Linkin Park, and then like the kid next to me, his name was Lane, and he was like, "Yo, this is tight," and I was like, "Okay," like and like I just like I just remember listening to a lot of Linkin Park in that time frame, and then like third fourth grade I got into Green Day. Green If it wasn't for Green Day and Billy Joel, I would not be like where I am at all. Like I got into choir and doing music and all that stuff just because of Green Day. His vocals are so close to his speaking range, and I find that really interesting because a lot of vocalists, like when they go to sing and other stuff, they do either some sort of falsetto or they pitch their voice or something else like that, and he doesn't really bullshit it. He sticks pretty close to his vocal, or like his normal speaking vocal range, and
Yeah.
he's also super talented. Plays like bass, piano, drums, guitar, um and something else. I forgot what the other instrument was, but he's just like the coolest fucking guy in the world to me.
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah. No, it is always interesting to see those, especially when you start out and you're like, oh, I just know this person. This is kind of the same, but a little different. Like when I was growing up, Linkin Park for me was a big influence as well. And then as soon as I started to see like Mike Shinoda start to play guitar as well, I was just like, whoa, this man can do everything. So it is
Yeah,
always
yeah.
like cool to see someone do something first, and then, you know, you start to see the other things that they know on the musical side and just have that much more appreciation for them.
Yeah, um, I would definitely agree with that. Because like my next step was like, obviously everybody got into like the Guitar Hero bands where like they get
Oh,
their first
yeah.
like taste of like metalcore or death metal or something like that. I was like, yo, this shit's pretty tight. Like I remember hearing All That Remains and I was like, yo, this is it. Like I fucking love this band.
Oh,
And they stayed a consistent for me through most of high school. I picked up like Ramstein and a couple other bands because I was in a German class, and like our teacher was like not upset with us if we listened to German music. And this one like emo kid next to me was like, "Bro, have you ever heard of Ramstein? They have a porno music video." And I'm like, "What?" And so like I got into Ramstein, and like I remember kind of like digging them, and then I got over them real fast. And then I think going into my junior year of high school, like the Zoomies couch tour happened, and like they stopped in my hometown of all fucking places, and they put up like this giant like skate like throw up skate park thing out in the parking lot near the end of the mall where like the movie theater and the Hot Topic were, of course. And We Came as Romans was headlining,
okay.
and that was just like I remember I was like, okay, I've never seen like a screaming band live before, so like hopefully this is cool. And then I saw it, and they were just eating shit on stage, like they were just sucked, and I was like so upset, and I was like, what the fuck? And so I kind of gave up on screaming music for a little bit, and like I really went into like folktronica, like Lights and Ellie Goulding. Lights is from Canada. She's my favorite artist ever.
Yeah,
I
she's sick.
got I, I got her fucking signature and shit on my arm, and I got also
Whoa,
yeah,
crazy.
I've met her. Yeah, she's amazing. Apparently she listens to hardcore.
Yeah.
But
Okay, sorry. We're
um
gonna go down the lights tangent because I know. So
sure.
I need to shout out my my good friend Jack Thomas. He's a drummer. He only has one arm, and he covered one of her songs. Shared it. Just crazy stuff on that side. But I think the discovery is that she actually listens to like heavier music. Like I'll air quotes that because I don't know if she still
I mean,
is married to what's his name
it's
from
about
yeah.
there's a big conspiracy theory behind all that,
Oh,
and it's the funniest
lights
thing ever because like she
conspiracy theories was the last thing I thought
I
we'd be talking about, but here
yeah,
we are.
like I've been listening to her since like 2009, 2010. I just got like a $400 record for I'll pull it later. I just got Siberia on a first press, and that cost me like $400, but whatever. Anyway, point being is that the conspiracy theory is that like she doesn't post pictures of her and her husband anymore. She only posts pictures of her cat and her child. And like supposedly there's like I don't believe it. I don't know. It's not my business. But supposedly her and Bo aren't really doing too hot. But at the same time, I don't care. I It's not my thing. I
Yeah.
never really liked Bo. I never really liked Bo or his music. Even when I was into the Scene Kid stuff, I didn't like his music. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just I don't.
Yeah,
But you know,
just the
I simp
things.
for Lights.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's yeah, lights. Man, there's so many things right here right now. But I think yeah, like the fact that I think she's one of those artists that like you don't realize that she is Canadian until it's like you actually think about it. Like Drake is kind of that same thing where he is mega famous, but people are like, "Oh yeah, he's from Toronto." But I think he pushes that into his, call it, brand identity a little bit more than probably Lights does. But
Yeah.
I have to agree. Even when I was in the scene phase and Bless the Fall was like the hottest band, as soon as they switched to Bo, I was like, I don't know. Like it kind of wasn't for me anymore.
I just could never stomach him, and I always thought he looked kind of weird. And if he sees this, like I'm sorry, but he just like I don't know, he just like I look at him and he just has like this like dead inside like vibe to him. And like I mean I've been in the army, man, and like I've deployed, and like I've seen like some really crazy motherfuckers. Like I've met a dude who was probably like 3 or 4 years younger than me. a gunner for a up armored Humvee, and him and one other person in his Humvee survived an ambush. And like the look that kid gives, and like I know this is like fucked up to say, but like the look that kid gave me when I would like sit there and like try to talk to him about stuff was like the same look that Bo gives. But like Bo hasn't been through the shit, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like I don't know, like there's something unsettling about that dude. So
Well, I'm honestly surprised. Like I wouldn't be like I would probably put money that neither Bo or Lights is probably going to watch this specific podcast episode. But if that does
I mean,
ever come up, I can always just be like, hey,
we'll drop an at her and be like, hey, we know you watch this shit, because she does. She actually engages with her fan stuff and all that, and like I've talked with her a couple times. She's a really cool fucking person. I mean, I hope if she does see this, she doesn't take any sort of like insult to any of it.
No. We're purely talking like we are very removed from any situation, but if Lights would ever want to come on this podcast like that, I'm putting it out into the ethos if that ever happens. But
oh, dude, I mean, she's been involved with so much like scene music and like metalcore music. Like, dude, honestly, some of Bring Me the Horizon's best work was the stuff that they did with her, if you ask me, because she was uncredited in There's a Hell for their intro song, and then she did Don't Go, which is like my favorite Bring Me the Horizon song fucking ever. Like, and and then she also did some of the outro stuff for that album on acoustic. So I don't, but either way, great person. And to get back to the original point of the conversation before we
yeah, I
deviated
was like,
down the Lights track,
what was the original question?
So to fast forward from, okay, so we went from like seeing We Came as Romans and they sucked,
Right, yeah,
to like getting into Lights and Ellie Goulding and stuff. So cool thing is I went to go see Lights, and I met this girl named Ashley Nicole, and she was like a professional photographer, and she's like, hey, I need an apprentice for this festival that I'm going to be going to. And I was like, all right, tight, like I'm down. Like we dabbed up at the light show and we're homies. Like I don't care, sure, like I'll go, I don't got anything better to do. And she's like, all right, it's and she did SXSW, so I assumed South by Southwest, and I was like, cool, I have family that lives in Austin, so we can just like stay with them for free. And then we get in the car and we're driving and we drive past Austin. We're going up to Dallas. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I thought you said it was South by Southwest. And she's like, no, it's South by So What? And I was like,
oh,
I'm
okay,
like, isn't that like the punk festival or something like that? She's like, yeah, it's like screamo and punk and metalcore and post hardcore and da 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 da. And I was like, all right, cool. So like, I went up there and like I got to see some of the bands that I haven't seen or like listened to since like early high school. And I went and saw, I mean, obviously We Came as Romans was headlining again, and I saw them, and completely like same, pretty much the same lineup, but this like they had completely changed in regards to camaraderie and like how good of a stage presence they had and like how polished they sound. And I was like, yo, this is tight. Like I like these guys now. And like and then like they were kind of like the gateway band. I got into some other like kind of like crappy melodic metalcore bands for a while.
sure, yeah,
And then like I joined the army, and then one of my friends that I hadn't seen since I was like a little kid, me and him reconnected, and he was like, "Yo, so I saw that you like certain like Warp Tour style metalcore, but have you ever heard of this?" And like shows me this like giant, not like literal encyclopedia, but he like pulls up like this crazy playlist on his phone of like all these bands that I remember listening to on like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 or
sure,
like
yeah.
Guitar Hero or some other shit, you know, or like stuff that my friends had listened to in high school, but I was like, I just never really retained it. Um, and like 25 to Life is, for example.
Right.
um, but like I was like, yo, I remember all this stuff. I thought hardcore was kind of like dead. I because like in Katy, where I lived in, which was outside of Houston, everybody only listens to like post hardcore and like MySpace deathcore.
Yeah.
So I was like, so I just assumed that like hardcore was dead. That's why there was post hardcore, you know. And I was obviously very fucking wrong, and then it went down into this deep dark rabbit hole of anything and everything. Like metallic hardcore and metalcore is still like my go-to, but uh, definitely went through some other phases of hardcore. I was like, oh, I really like power violence. Oh, I really like screamo. I really like beatdown and da 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 da. And like eventually I just settled and I was like, I can like tolerate a lot of that shit. Just my thing definitely is this still metallic hardcore and like white belt, like sassy metalcore from like the early 2000s. Like, you know what I'm saying?
White belt
Like,
sassy
like,
metalcore.
yeah, like
Right.
so like
Yeah.
Disembodied isn't sassy, but like they're kind of like white belt metalcore, and then like This Day Forward is a really good one. My friend recently showed me them and I was like, holy fuck, like I can't believe bands sounded like this back in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Um I guess good sassy white belt metalcore bands for now would be like Sea Space Cowboy and Wrist Meat Razor and stuff like that. So
Yeah, no, there's a
yeah.
lot to unpack there, but I think an interesting point, just how seeing your first, I wouldn't say We Came as Romans is a hardcore band by any means, but seeing a band in that heavy music space and having kind of like a bad experience, in the sense like maybe they just had a very poor set,
Shit
and
set.
who
Yeah.
knows, like, the whys, maybe the setup wasn't right and things were off, but how that actually kind of propelled you not to check out heavy music as a whole. And it was only with this maybe slight miscommunication as far as what fest you were going to kind of put you back in the place of seeing heavy music and having a good experience, and then kind of like writing the rest of history. So it's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
And that I will say it was really cool because like the little connections that I made at like South by Southwest with like other photographers and shit. um when I was there, I was there on a press pass, so like I was going to all the after parties with the artist and like hanging out with the artist. And I remember hanging out with fuck, what is that UK metalcore? Within the Ruins, I think, or something like that, or Within the Family Ruins, something like that. I remember hanging out with them, and they just thought I was like the coolest fucking dude ever. And they were like buying me drinks left. This is before I got sober, but they were just buying me drinks left and right. And they're just like, dude, you're so, like, thanks for like interviewing us. You're so nice. Da 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 da. And I was like, okay. And then like a real funny one that I had was like I walked in on the interview of Memphis Mayfire and like totally fucked up their interview.
Oh,
Like I
what?
walked in, yeah, so like they converted the locker room of this baseball stadium into like the media area.
Sure. Okay.
And so all the guys from Memphis Mayfire had like crawled into like the little ice tubs that like the baseball players like take
Okay.
ice
Yeah.
baths
Yeah.
in. And but I mean they were still in their clothes and they weren't like wet or anything, but it was like raining outside and it was like in the 30s. It was just fucking miserable outside. So they were all like cramped into these tubs, and it was Matty Mullins and then like his guitarist behind him, and they were like, just spread eagle just like jammed into this thing. And I walk in and I'm like, what the fuck? And like, and then he's like, oh, what's up, man? You want to join us? I can make some more room. And he like props his legs over the side of the tub, and I was like, what the fuck am I walking in on? And he's like, hi, I'm Maddie. I'm, from Memphis Mayfire. And I'm like, hi, what's up? I'm Gabe. I'm just like, like pretty much an intern. Like, and then this lady that was like filming all of it, like puts your camera and mic down, like real aggressively, like, and it's like, excuse me, I'm interviewing these people. I'm going to have to redo all of this now because of you. And I'm like,
Oh, I really wanted to jump
yeah.
on the
And I was
internet
like,
and see that, but
yeah,
she's
yeah, and then they and like the Memphis Mayfire guys just fucking died. They thought that shit was so funny, and I was like, okay. And then I literally like 10 seconds later, I went and interviewed Frank Iero, which is like the coolest fucking guy ever.
Mm.
That dude he's one of those kind of like uh Billy Joe guys from Green Day. Like he does fucking everything.
Yeah.
And I went to go like fix my hair in the bathroom and before the interview, and he walks in and he starts using the bathroom behind me. He's like, yeah, it's fucking cold out there. And I'm like, yeah, man, it fucking sucks. And he's like, so what are you gonna do? I'm like, oh, I'm about to go interview Frank Iero. And he's like, oh, cool shit, man. Well, I hope you have a good like experience with that. And I was like, all right, cool. I didn't know it was him
Right.
because
Yeah.
I never
You're facing
like
different
obviously,
directions. Yeah.
well, well, yeah, So he was like talking to me from behind, and I could see him in the mirror, but I didn't know who the fuck he was. And like,
Right. Oh, so you only maybe saw the back of his head, if anything.
literally,
Yeah.
and like he doesn't have the same scene kid hair that he had when he was in My Chemical Romance. So I was like, okay, whatever. And then like I go to like set up the camera and setting up the tripod. Ashley comes in, she's sitting down and she's getting ready to interview him, and she's like, hey, like, how does this look? Da, 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 da. And then he comes up and taps me on the shoulder. He's like, hey, I'm Frank, nice to meet you. I'm like, motherfucker. Like, and he was like the nicest dude ever.
Yeah.
And that interview is somewhere on the internet in the deep recesses of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, because of after parties and all this other shit, like I got to meet a lot of really cool like artists and stuff. And eventually when I got into like booking for a little bit when I was in the army, I used a lot of those like connections with the photographers to get emails for bands or emails for agents. And some of it paid off, some of it like went fucking nowhere
Yeah.
because some of those bands want like an absurd amount to be booked. But you know, whatever. I was just a army kid trying to book hardcore shows, so
Yeah.
you can't really expect too much from it. But
Yeah, I think that's always a cool thing, especially just I almost think that like being in hardcore is like being raised by wolves. Like as soon as you go out and do your own thing, you'll always have this like pack of wolves to like support you. So if you know, if you're playing in bands for years on end and then you're like, hey, I want to start my own like little small business side hustle, or what I want to do this, and maybe it doesn't even relate to music at all. I feel like a lot of people are like, you make all these friendships and connections, and you know, like you said, not it's not a guaranteed that everyone and their mother is going to be supporting you if you go and do something else. But you know, I think of um by of Pack from Knocked Loose to, you know, during this whole pandemic to start a little like candle company business, like nothing to do with heavy music by any means, but he, you know, he came on the podcast and he said like, I don't think this would be as, you know, busy right now if I didn't, you know, have all these friends and
yeah,
connections
yes.
through
So
music.
Jess from Mortality Rate, she started making like mask and pillows and all this other stuff to like occupy her free time. And I was the dude who won like the big Mortality Rate giveaway at the beginning of the pandemic when they
Oh,
did
okay. Yeah, I didn't know that.
so like I've gotten somewhat like I've gotten to the acquaintance basis with that band, and like they're really fucking cool, really genuine people. And like I've gotten to speak to her about like, oh, okay, like so how is this going for like you got all this shit going on with the band, and then all of a sudden it just all stops, and y'all are like probably one of the most well-known Canadian hardcore bands at this point in time, and like everything just fucking stops. So like what's going on? And then like she kind of gave me clues about World of Pleasure before it became a thing, because I also knew one of the members of Serration because he sold me some of their like band member only merch.
Yeah.
um so like I, you know, whatever, anyway, point being is that like I found out about some of that stuff, and then we got to talking, and she was like, "Yeah, you know, I also do mask and all this other stuff. So if you ever want anything, just like let me know." And she was like really fucking cool about it. So, I think it's cool that there's little side ventures that people in music are able to do, and like you said, they get support from, you know, random places, either be their fans or like whatever, you know.
Mhm.
A good example is like the drummer of Sanguisugabog or whatever,
Yeah.
that like that real crazy death metal band. He does like custom shirts now, and
Oh,
like
okay.
I've got like several shirts from him, like this one and a couple others, where he just like, you know, he just does like these crazy fucking jobs on like hardcore, deathcore, metalcore, and death metal shirts. And like you pay him like a couple bucks and he does a commission.
Mm.
Either that or you can buy a shirt from him at like markup price, which, you know, he's still not charging that much. So what would be like a $20 shirt, he charges $30 for, because he's doing like a custom dye job on it.
Yeah.
But it's just like seeing people to be able to do that during the pandemic, move forward, create a business or whatever it might be, and then be able to be able to sustain themselves during all of this without having to go out of their way and do, you know, all this crap with unemployment or workforce commissions or all this other stuff is really cool. And like I think that shows strength to like the music community, if anything. So
yeah, I think a lot of people default into, there's no money in hardcore. It's all like a break even kind of game. And I think like, yeah, some of that is very true where it's, it's way different if someone's booking, call it a pop music festival versus like a hardcore music festival. Like there are way different
it's
things
so
that you need
niche.
to, yeah, it's very, very
It's
niche. But I
like,
feel like playing in niches is a strength where it's like, there's not as much competition, so to speak, just within like people that you're trying to fight attention for, things like that. But
yeah.
I do think that like it is really cool to see, like you were saying, like, whether you're doing, I know Jess also does like a bunch of like tattoo pillows. Like if hardcore is a niche, that's like a way smaller niche, but it sounds like that has been, fruitful for her to like, get those out. And yeah, it's just cool to see. It's also cool to see people that you only know. Like I only know this person because they scream into a mic and sound maniacal, but then it's like, oh, you actually are a really good baker and you make killer donuts. Like, shit like that is also like really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I watched this documentary on like straight edge bands or whatever like a couple years ago. It was talking about like how all these dudes that used to be part of, like, I think it was the New York hardcore documentary, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was talking about like how all these dudes that grew up in the New York hardcore scene, even after they moved, they kept the good side of the hardcore ethics, not like the shitty kind of like
The
tough
Boston
guy stuff.
beatdown
Like,
shit. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, well, not even Boston beatdown, just like the the pseudo tough guy. I gotta act like an asshole for everything. Like they
Right.
they
Yeah.
they left all that behind. They started showing like a lot of the compassionate side of hardcore, which I think a lot of people don't realize is that hardcore is super compassionate and emotional if they let it.
Mm.
So like all these dudes were like moving from New York down to like the Midwest or out to California and stuff, and they were starting like vegan edge restaurants and
Mm-hmm.
all this other stuff. And when you go in, they're playing vegan edge bands, like over the loudspeakers, or they have vegan edge bands playing there in the restaurant
Right.
as you're just sitting there eating your fucking quinoa bowl, like whatever the fuck,
Right.
so like so I just think it's tight to see that.
Yeah.
It just
We have literally gone to places that I never thought this episode specifically would hit on, but I'm really
yeah.
glad. So I want to make sure that we do talk about the bands that you're a part of. So
Sure.
tell me a little bit about Belligerence. You guys recently put out that EP, Suicide and Sobriety. So talk to me about, give me, the Cole's notes as far as how the band started, and we can also talk about that release specifically.
So I started the band when I was going to a lot of like the hardcore punk shows. So there's, and everybody's gonna hate me for this. There's a difference between hardcore punk, hardcore, and like metalcore and all this other shit. There's like a clear difference. Like hardcore punk is more like shouty vocals, hardcore is more screamy vocals, and then metalcore is like, obviously like heavier riffs and it's still screamy vocal, whatever the fuck. Anyway, point being, so I was going to a lot of these hardcore punk shows, and I finally saw like a local metalcore band called Outcomes, and they were fucking crazy. I was like, what the fuck? Like I didn't know metalcore like could have this side to it. Like I just thought y'all would be considered hardcore or something like that. And they're like, no, like this is actual like metalcore, blah blah blah. Um, and I was going through like some suicidal related shit because of I had a whole bunch of friends kill themselves when I was in the army. And I was like, yo, I really like this specific sound of like hardcore. So I was like, I got sober, and then like I talked with some of my army buddies, and I was like, hey, I want to make a hardcore band. And they were like, okay, cool. And then like we had our first meetup. None of them knew what the fuck they were doing. So like I hit up some of the hardcore punk scene guys from Temple, and like um our drummer wanted to play like crust punk stuff, and then like our guitarist wanted to play like sludge metal riffs, and I was like, nah, this isn't what I'm talking about at all, because like I was trying to push for something that was closer to like, it sounds so corny, but I was trying to do like a dual vocal thing, but in like a Harm's Way style band, and like it wasn't working. So I scrapped the band, moved it to Austin, had like just various people in it. Like I can't tell you how many different fucking members we went through. I'm still friends with pretty much all of them. unless they like moved away or I just don't talk to them anymore, whatever. I'm not gonna trash talk any of them. They're all really cool people, and I wouldn't have them in the band if I didn't trust them.
Sure.
But basically, we went through like a fuck ton of lineup changes, and then between me like getting put in the mental health ward a second time, and then still dealing with a whole bunch of the sobriety shit, and then booking shows, and then me getting out of the army, it was just like such a big back and forth with, okay, how am I gonna keep this band alive? How am I gonna do like this podcast agency that I was working with that I was also doing booking for? How am I gonna like handle getting out of the army? Because I lived in Fort Hood, but was driving an hour and a half down to South Austin multiple times a week to do band practice or to do a podcast or some shit. And I was just like, this is like a
There's a
lot
lot
of
going
shit
on
to
all
handle.
at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was so much shit to handle, and then eventually, I so like on the Texas hardcore page, like uh my guitarist Matt, that's from Tennessee, posted something, and he was like, "Yo, I'm looking to start like a metalcore band that sounds something like Sanction or Harm's Way or some other band. I can't remember what it was, or Kubla Khan or something like that." And I was like, "All right, cool. Like that's the type of band I'm trying to do. Like let me know what's up." And he messages me instantly. He's like, "Hey, do you want to hear like the demo that I wrote for you?" Oh, excuse me.
Oh no.
It's the carbonation from this coming back.
Two bevs will do that to you.
Yeah. um so he's like, "Hey, do you want to hear this demo?" And I was like, "Nah, dude, you're good. Like you already know what you're talking about. Like these other guys that I was working with originally, not the second lineup we had, but the first lineup we had didn't know what they were talking about. Second lineup that we had wanted to talk or wanted to do more like beatdown stuff, and I was like, "Yeah, like I guess, but I mean that's not really what I wanted to do." And then stuff happened, and they left the band, and it wasn't even like a moral disagreement. It was just like their old band got back together, so they went back to their old band, and I was like, all right, that's fine, whatever. Point being, um so he was like, my guitarist was like, "Hey, do you want to hear these demos?" I'm like, "Nah, you know what, if you know what you're talking about, I'm gonna trust you. Like I don't even worry about it." And then he still sent me the demos anyway. And the demos, I can't remember what. Yeah, so Bad Trip was still called Bad Trip, but it was like not didn't sound anywhere like it does now.
Sure.
It still had a lot of the kind of like D beat to it, but there wasn't as many like panic chord dissonant riffs stuff in it. And then he sent me Grackle Gang, but instead of it being in drop B like we play now, it was in drop A. So it was this super like dum, 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 and I was like, "Yo, this shit's tight as fuck. Like let's play this in drop B and we'll run it." And we just kept on tuning it and tuning it and tuning it, and eventually we got it to the points where we did our demo, which was actually recorded in like September or October of 2019, and then we didn't release it till January just because we dragged our feet on it. And then we ended up dropping the album with some new stuff on it. And in the process, I got really close with the guys from Antagonist AD, which whatever. They're my favorite band ever. I love each and every one of those guys so fucking much. That band like kept a gun out of my mouth for a lot of the shit that I was going through in the army. And so I got Sam Crocker, which is the vocalist, to do guest vocals on our like last track of the album.
Yeah.
And like I was just like, I just hit him up one day because like I would randomly talk to him just to like do like a little check-in, like mental health wise, and be like, "Hey, just so you know, like I'm out of the army now and I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you again for like being a compassionate person, da 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 da." And he and then he would say some stuff back, and he was always real like positive. He was always a really good mentor. He's a really quiet dude. He doesn't really say much, but when he does say something, it's very
You
like
listen. Yeah.
impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a very very impactful thing. So I just hit him up and I was like, "Hey man, my band's dropping an album and we have this song. Um, we haven't really decided what we wanted to do with it yet, and the other person that we were gonna have do guest vocals dropped off the album. Is there any way in hell that I can get you to do this?" And he was like, "Fuck it, why not?" And I was like, "For real?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, do you want me to pay you anything?" He's like, "Nah, dude, I like you. You're cool." And I was like, for real. And he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. So I just like geeked the fuck out instantly. I was like, oh my god, 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 oh my god. Like my favorite vocalist is now on my fucking album. What the fuck? Like,
Right. Yeah.
and I paid for his studio session. But I mean, I think in the grand scheme of things, like that's like fucking nothing, especially considering how he's he's from New Zealand, but he's stuck in Australia because of quarantine shit. And then he had to
Oh,
record through
okay. Yeah.
the guy who does the audio mastering for all the Hate 56 sets in Australia is the guy who does the
Oh, okay.
recording for them.
Yeah,
So
cool.
so I ended up paying that dude to do the mastering for Sam's vocals on that. And then yeah, anyway, point being, it got to that, and then so on and so forth, and it got to
Yeah.
the point where
Yeah, it is really
we are
cool.
now.
Like sometimes you like, I don't know. I'm an ideas man. Like I just have so many things up here that I want to do, whether through Scoped or my band or just other things. But the worst thing in the world that if you ask someone is they say no and it doesn't happen. That is literally the worst thing. So why not just like put it out there? And like, there's been plenty of times where there's been certain guests on this podcast that I've just shot a message to and literally expecting like it's not going to happen, and they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." So it doesn't hurt to try, and I think trying
Yeah,
really matters for
and
that.
like honestly, I was really nervous to hit you up because like I'd seen some of like the camera work that you had done for like the Wild Rose sets, and I was like, yo, this dude's like the Canadian Hate 56. Like, I don't want to fucking blow my chances with this guy, like, because and then like I'd seen some of your podcast stuff, and I was like, all right, like he's like put us on his playlist, so I'll hit him up and see what he has to say, and then sure enough, we are where we are at now.
Right. Yeah.
So
No, well that's very nice for you to say. I know it is always, I don't know, it's strange cuz for me it's like I feel like I'm this tiny little cog in the overall like the overall machine that is like North American hardcore, let's call it that. Um but yeah, like the fact that you see stuff like, there's certain guests that I have reached out to and then I've either heard boo about, or I think that there are certain things where it's like someone is so big. Like I'll just say it now because I think eventually this is gonna come into play. There's signs that it's close, but I've hit up Morgan, or no, not Morgan. I've hit up Jamie from Code Orange multiple times. I think I always call it message request purgatory, where it's like I'm sure he has 99 plus, and I'm one of those 99. But there's been a couple times where I've jumped into Codone stream and I'm like, hey, like podcast, and I've caught his attention, and he's like, oh yeah, we're gonna do that. So that might eventually happen. Maybe that's a tease for myself, but yeah, it's like even if that didn't happen, the chase to maybe have that is kind of exciting to me. So
yeah, I mean that's just as tight. Like when I was doing that podcast stuff for the Devil's Mic, which is like an Austin alternative music podcast, I had like talked to Scotty from Street Soldier over in the UK, and I was like, yo, like you're a really cool dude, and like you're liking some of my statuses, and you like some of the stuff that my band put out like forever ago, and like I've liked your band since its inception. Like, do you want to like do some sort of interview thing or something like that? And we got it to the point to where like I was supposed to talk to his manager or something like that, because apparently they have a manager. I didn't think that a beatdown band from the UK would have a manager, but I mean, whatever. So like it's just like it is, I would expect that for like Desolated, but
sure,
like
right,
Street Soldiers still kind of like on the up and comings right now, so like I wasn't
yeah,
really expecting them to have a manager so quick, because this is still right after their first like album had dropped, so they were
sure,
still like
okay. Just that sentence, I
people.
didn't expect a beatdown band to have a manager. It's just too funny.
Yeah, and like but Scotty was super cool about it, and like I felt really bad because I gave it to the other, like I did my side, which was get the information for like the hardcore and metalcore related bands, and then give it to the guy who was like the showrunner, and like I gave the info over, and then it ended up going nowhere. I think it was because like their manager wanted us to do like some really obscure time or some shit like that because of like UK time difference to here, and it was just not going to work out for us because I was still in the army and all this other shit. So
Yeah.
whatever the fuck, but you know, it happens, and I feel that.
And I think a lot of people create these lofty ideas like it needs to be this person. It needs to be like, there's been many bands that I've played in where I thought we're going to be the band. There's many times in those bands where it's like, I want to have so and so on a feature, and then they're like, no, I don't want to do that. And I think over time, call it the L's, like over time those become less like of a deal, because there is so much opportunity in hardcore and just heavy music in general. And you know, if you have this idea and they say no, and there's plenty of other people that you can ask that would probably be down to either do a feature, you know, sign your band, whatever it is. So it's just about like not getting so like dwelling on these like big L's, like when they could have been W's, but like you'll get to the W. You just got to work for it.
I mean, yeah. So in regards to like music opportunity, I've the only thing I've really experienced L's with for the bands, sorry, voice crack. To step back, to like kind of where we were talking about like the inception of the band and how it went. So the only thing I've really experienced with L's with the band, honestly, is finding a record label, because like I was already friends with the guy who ran Harness Records, who was doing our cassettes. I was already friends with him through like the Wax Vessel like group chat and all the, or not even group chat, but like group, and through Metal and Core Collectors and all that other shit. And like he was like, "Yo, I like your band. I want to do this." And he offered to do the demo originally. I was like, "Nah, like I fucking hate the demo. It sounds so bad. Like please, just like wait until the regular album comes out." And he did, and it turned out fucking great. And we got like 3 versions of it coming out. We have a Yoda ketamine one. I can't tell you how happy that makes me. Like it's a green cassette, and then like the J card is Yoda standing in front of a ketamine factory holding a bottle of ketamine. And I'm just because like that's
dude,
like
you have to send that to me after this. That sounds
inside joke with my band about the Yoda ASMRs.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I got a huge kick out of that. But yeah, I mean, like with all the L's, I mean, I can't tell you how many record labels I've talked to, and they're like, "Yeah, we want to press you," and I'm like, "All right, tight," and they're like, "Oh wait, your EP is only like 12 minutes long. Wait, you know, like, do you have any more music that you want to put out?" I'm like, "Yeah, but we haven't like done vocals on it yet," and like my second guitarist that is the effects guitarist and like our sound engineer and recording guy, he has COVID right now. So I mean, I'm not going to be able to go over to his house and like do a song with him just to throw on an extra track for this. And then, you know, like, whatever, like, I'm not going to go out of my way when he's sick and like risk exposing me and my wife to that. It just for one extra song to be on this, just so you'd be happy to press my band. Like, I'm sorry, like that's cool. Like I get it. But at the same time, it's just like, bro, like I'm just asking for like a 7-inch, you know, like, or like, I'm just asking for a 10-inch or a 7-inch, or, you know, and if you want to get real crazy about it, a single-sided 12-inch. Like, I'm not asking for anything crazy. Like, I'm a fucking vinyl head. Like, I have over 190 vinyl records, right? So like, that's all I want. I just want to get to the points where I'm on a fucking record, like an actual like vinyl, because that's like the big check off for me in life. You know, I got CDs and cassettes. That's cool as fuck, and I love that. But it's just like I want to get a vinyl record, because I feel like that's one of those big checklists that if you can get that in hardcore, you're like, okay, I've gotten somewhere. You know?
I think just with, you know, being signed or whatever goals that you have, I think everyone's got a varying degree of different things all throughout hardcore. But I think that, you know, not being patient about the process of that. Like a lot of people will drop their demo and they like want that immediately, and it's like, no, like do things over time. Like try and think of things that are eye-catching outside of just the normal like cookie cutter aspect of doing a band. Like you do the tour and then you do this. Like there are tried and true things that are absolutely, but I think because of the amount of oversaturation that there is just within, you know, heavy music, I don't want to say a genre specifically, like trying to think of things that are outside the box that like maybe catch someone's like eye and they're like, huh, like I've never seen a band do that. That's kind of interesting. Sometimes those new things are a flop, and that's fine too. It's just a matter of like having fun and playing around with it.
Yeah, and like I really, I mean that's 100% true because like for where we are in Texas, like everybody wants to play like this down tempo, beat down, like deathcore kind of sounding stuff where
Sure.
it's like they're playing hot cross buns and drop A, you know, like and like you know that's like okay, cool, like that's fun, but like when you hear the fifth band on a fucking show and they all fucking sound the same, like I'm sorry, but that gets kind of like, you know, like you're just like, all right, that's tight, and like I'm friends with these dudes, and I'm gonna support them, but at the same time, you're just like, I want to hear something different.
Yeah.
And it's not, by no means is it like a jab to these people or am I making fun of them. It's just like, yo, I just, you know, I want to do something different. And that was this is another thing that goes into the band is that like I was talking to all the guys, and I'm so lucky that my guitarist Matt listens to like every fucking type of metalcore band under the fucking sun.
Sure.
And even with like bands that he's never heard of, if I send it to him, he'll still listen to it and like get an idea of like, okay, this is what he's talking about. Um, and I mean, we get compared to like disembodied a lot, you know, and like I fucking love that. Like, you know, and I mean, I by no means am I saying that's what we are or, you know, this is what we want to be, but like being from Texas and specifically like the central Texas hardcore scene and then like not sounding like a Texas band is paying off so much. And like we get people from, you know, the East Coast hitting us up all the time, being like, "Oh, dude, you sound like a fucking like New York hardcore band from the '90s." Oh, you know, in Australia, they're like, "Yo, you sound like a Australian like Mosh core band
Yeah.
from, you know, like the mid 2000s or like, you know, shit like that." And like I dig that because like when I went into starting this band, I wanted my band to be somewhere between like Sanction, Recon, Antagonist AD, and Disembodied. And like for us to have all of those kind of like swirled together really paid, I don't know, like it paid off because nobody else sounds like that here except for like maybe if you find like an obscure screamo band that does like metalcore riffs maybe, but
Sure.
like you know, like I don't know
Yeah.
anybody else that sounds like us.
I
So
think it's like um when you're in a certain scene, like certain scenes will, like the local bands will influence the newer bands that are coming up just naturally, because it's like
mhm.
you're seeing those bands on a more regular schedule in a non-COVID world, and you're thinking about like, well, this band does really well, and these types of beats or whatever. I can definitely look at even just the Canadian provinces and be like, okay, like, Toronto has a certain kind of sound, like Alberta has a certain kind of sound. and
Definitely.
and there's been times where, in the projects that I've always like wanted to be the oddball, almost like have something that like I want to see bands like this in my area, so I might as well just start that band. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's good to like, recognize your space, but at the same time like write the music that you want to, no matter where you are in the world. So
Yeah, and I mean, like that's one thing that I've noticed about like Texas is that like up in Dallas, it's a lot of like the crossover hardcore. So like
yeah.
there'll be like a lot of those hardcore kids up in Dallas listen to a fuck ton of like thrash and death metal. So you'll hear a lot of that real cool kind of like power trip style hardcore, and then like in Central Texas, like up in the Temple area, it's a lot of hardcore punk. So it's a lot of like old school like uh pro mags worship style
Sure.
bands. And
Yeah.
then like here in Austin, in like the last year or so it's been a lot of beatdown bands, but prior to that like Austin has always had this amazing screamo scene, like Portrayal of Guilt's from here, and they, you know, Mothman is another band from here. I'm trying to think of god, what is the name of the other, not Illustrations, because that was Portrayal of Guilt's old band. Anyway, point being is that like Austin has really cool fucking like screamo bands, and like San Antonio had a lot of like the like kind of Chicano deathcore, hardcore crossover stuff, where you could see some really interesting bands. Where it's like even though it's like deathcore, and I'm not talking like down tempo deathcore, I'm talking about like genuine like classic deathcore, but the
Right.
kids are moshing to it as if it was hardcore. is real cool, and then like Houston has a very specific like old school like beatdown vibe to it. And like Houston also used to have like a really cool like queer core, queer punk scene, but I don't know if that's really a thing there anymore. I don't really go to Houston for shows.
Right.
And yeah, so I mean, like I definitely see what you're talking about with like, oh, okay, you know, Calgary has this one sound, and then like Alberta has this other sound. So like for me, when I hear like for Canadian hardcore, like when I think of uh, Calgary, I think of Mortality Rate, and then when I hear of Alberta, I think of Serration. You know, like even though they're both in the same scene, like I think of two very distinct sounds that aren't anything alike, other than the fact of like, okay, they're down tuned to drop B or drop C or something like that, and then they have like the occasional two step. You know, like that's just what.
Yeah, and I think like, yeah, I think it's just a matter of like, um, again, just writing the music that you want to, and even if your scene isn't like, like my band, like we're definitely more in the thrash crossover space, and there's not a lot of that, and I like that. I like kind of being the oddball to kind of, just be that taste where it isn't, maybe more in the metallic hardcore or metalcore side. Like I think
Yeah.
having different bands to play shows together is really healthy because it kind of like sparks all these different side projects and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that because like some of the coolest shows I've seen were up in Dallas. Like, I went to a local show, so Ballista was supposed to play up in
In Wild
I
Rose.
think yeah, and they were supposed to play with Knocked Loose and Mortality Raid or something like that. And so like we're really good friends with Ballista. I love River to death. She is the coolest fucking person ever. And I remember like my first Dallas hardcore show, they were like second or third on the playlist, but like the first band was just like, you know, a generic hardcore band. I can't even remember who it was, kind of thing. And then like the next band was my friend Sam's band Perseverance, which was like a Christian straight edge band. And then
Okay.
yeah, yeah, and they were like, you know, it was really cool because they went from being like kind of like melodic youth crewy style hardcore to where like they'd close their set playing Earth Crisis, like you know, like it was tight as fuck, and I love those guys. And then Ballista played, and I was like, holy shit, like what the fuck, like how did I just go from like generic hardcore to, you know, spirit filled straight edge to MySpace metalcore.
Right.
And then like the next band was the Optimist, and the Optimist was like somewhere between new metalcore and hardcore, so they kind of had like that Alpha Wolf style to them.
Okay.
And then like I forgot who the headline, I think the headliner was Insurgents, and like Insurgents is like pretty much a Texas version of Recon. So like
Yeah.
so just seeing all that in one show, it was just like, yo, I love that. You know, I don't
Yeah.
want to go to the show and see five of the same fucking band. You know,
Yeah.
like I understand if it's like a big headlining package and it's like, oh, okay, you know, all these death metal bands are playing with each other and they're all really popular. So like, okay, cool, that makes sense. But if it's like, if I'm going to a hardcore show and it's all the same fucking shit and they all share the same band members, I mean, okay, cool, no knock on you, but it's just like, you know, I want to be able to hear different stuff.
Yeah, I
So
think that's
like,
why fests like work so well, especially like fests like LDB or This Is Hardcore. Like the people that put on those individual fests always kind of focus on like having variety, and you can kind of see everything in one weekend. Where I think it is really cool to see one of the last touring packages that was going around just before or I guess it was during when COVID hit and then it got canceled, was the tour with I Am and Spite and Orthodox. Like there are slight subgenre differences between a lot of those bands, but there's a lot of I would say there's probably more similarities than differences. But like you were saying, like being able to see like either a mixed bill show or there's a festival where it's just like you can see
you like
beatdown bands.
everybody on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah, yeah.
very very sick.
That's how it was for me for Furnace Fest. I was really upset that Furnace Fest got pushed back again like yesterday, but
Yeah, I saw
that thing had literally fucking every band that I like on there. And I like there was even like some pop punk bands from Austin that were playing on it. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, and I messaged the vocalist of the pop punk band. I was like, hey, like I know you don't listen to hardcore, but like you're playing with like Zayo and like Converge, right? And she's like, oh, she's like, nah, who's that? I was like, okay, well, here. And then she's like, oh, holy shit. I'm like, I don't think you understand, like, this is fucking insane. Like, you're playing with bands that are like legendary in like the, alternative music scene, and like you're playing with them. Like, like, did you ever think that was gonna happen? And she was like, nah, I don't really listen to that type of music. And I was like, I mean, all right, like, cool. I would like, that's tight as fuck though, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, we've gotten on multiple tangents, but like it's been, it's really cool some of the things that we got to hit on.
It's been a real quick. Adam from Orthodox is like the nicest person ever. I went to a show and it was when Orthodox was on tour with Body Snatcher, and my wife was like sick as fuck and she couldn't come out to the set. And like after the set, I caught the Orthodox dudes outside because they knew some of the guys from a deathcore band here called Purifier. And at the time, Purifier's bass player was filling in for us, and he was also dating my former roommate. And so we were outside, and I was like shooting the shit with the Orthodox dudes, and I was talking to Adam, and I was like, and he was like, "Oh yeah, dude, I saw you got fucking nailed in the head with that tall boy. Like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't get in my mouth, so I'm cool." He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm straight edge." And he's like, "Oh shit, no way." And then like we got into a conversation about that, and then eventually it came around to like, oh yeah, my wife is a huge fan of y'all, but like she works at this vegan ice cream shop, and between doing that and her just now getting sick and all this other shit, she wasn't able to come to your set, and y'all are like her favorite band. And he was like, oh no shit, well, like, tell her I wish she could have come out. And no. I was like, actually, could you like FaceTime her? And he was like, yeah, nobody's ever asked me to do that before. So he like took my phone and FaceTimed my wife, and was like, hey, yeah. And he was like, hey, I'm Adam. I'm pretty sure you know who I am, but anyway, I'm really sorry you couldn't make it out to my set. I heard you work at a vegan ice cream shop. That's really fucking cool. Blah blah blah. We're gonna be back in February. I hope to see you then. And my wife's like, I'm deaf, I can't really understand you, because my wife is legally deaf, she has to wear hearing aids. But she was like, I'm deaf, I can't really hear you, but thank you so much for FaceTiming me, I appreciate it. And he's like, and he just like got such a kick out of it. And then like after they hung up, he's like, nobody's ever asked me to do that before, and that's really cool. So like, that's like my really positive note about Orthodox. I have a lot of respect for those dudes.
Yeah,
So.
I was fortunate enough to see them on a very quick route that they did with Kublai Khan, and yeah, Adam came on the
God, I would
podcast
have
here,
killed for
and
that.
yeah, it's just that's a band that's on my list that when shows come back, I want to get them in Calgary, because I know a lot of straight edge, metalcore nerds were like very bummed that that tour package didn't come all the way out. So yeah, mad shout out to Adam and the Orthodox crew. Yeah. Well, Gabe, we should kind of start to wrap up the show here.
For sure.
We haven't talked as much about belligerence that I thought we would, but you know, maybe one of the second to last questions I can ask you is what you guys have coming down. You were mentioning before we were recording, you have a couple things coming down the pipe.
Yeah. So I'm so sorry we got so sidetracked on all this stuff. So like, I don't know, we went from, hardcore, scene economics and politics to this. Okay, so let me adjust the knobs. So basically what's going on is that we do have a four-way split planned at sometime next year.
Okay, cool.
And that's going to be with some of our friend bands. We were we're still trying to get pressed. I did convince this one record label to put us and Second Wind on record together. I'm just waiting on Second Wind's approval to do it at this point. But it's like on a Wax Vessel style label where they do like these real crazy elaborate records. So fingers crossed for that. But for that four-way split, it's supposed to be like Second Wind, Buried But Still Breathing, and Behind Colored Glass. And that's just going to be like a really cool mix of like kind of heavier metalcore with white belt metalcore. So like me and Behind Colored Glass are like super white belt, and then buried but still breathing. Used to be white belt, but now they're pushing into the heavier side. So I think they would mesh real well with,
They're like
with
green
second
belt or, something like that.
yellow belt hardcore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, point being that's coming out.
Cool.
We are thinking about dropping a new song because we did have it written completely, and I can go do vocal recording at my guitarist Matt's house. We're just kind of trying to figure out what we're gonna do with the cassette launch right now.
Sure.
And as soon as that's done, then we'll be able to go forward. But yeah, that's pretty much the plans with the band. And like, I really, 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 really hope to be playing up in Canada. Like, we've had so many fucking like press agencies and like booking agencies and random people from Canada like hit us up being like, "Hey, y'all guys remind me of Suration. Hey, you guys remind me of Cauldron from the UK.
Yeah.
Hey, you remind me of whoever." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's tight." Because if you look at our like related artists, it says Suration, World of Pleasure, Mortality Rate, Cauldron,
Right.
Orthodox, like all this other stuff. So I was like, know some of these people. So yeah, like I would love to come up to Canada and play. So I mean, like, I think our big plan post COVID is just fucking tour. Like that's we got to play 4 shows before COVID hit, and we headlined the last one, and like we never opened. We were always mid-bill or co-headlining. So for the last show that was like here in Austin, to be like the last hardcore band to play in Austin and to be headlining at that was really fucking tight. Um, so I want to be able to tour. Like
Yeah.
that's my
I,
biggest
I
thing. And
think
not
I think this whole pandemic is like putting people in that position of like life is short, like take
fuck it.
take the time that you can just to tour and do that. So I hope to see when shows come back, like shows every other weekend, or have it be a little bit more frequent for the places that maybe only have it once a month. So
Yeah.
that's very cool to see. And obviously, as like the minute that happens and you want to play Canada, you have myself and a plethora of other people here who would be more than happy to welcome you
Yeah.
and Mosh Hard. So
yeah, I definitely want to play Canada. Because like that's one of the first hardcore bands I found on my own was Mortality Rate. So like that's one of my goals in life is to play with them. I also want to play Australia really, really bad, just because like I know Sabian from Alpha Wolf, and then like I know all of Antagonist AD, and then I know most of Exile, which is like the side project band of Antagonist AD, where the bass player is the vocalist, and it's like old school. I don't know. It's like Justice for the Damned kind of style stuff. Justice for the Damned is tight as fuck. Those guys are so fucking nice.
Insane record that they put out this year.
Oh yeah,
it's insane.
Fucking nuts. But yeah, I don't know. Like that's the big goal is just put out probably 2 more tracks in the next like 2 to 3 months, and then after that we're gonna just start focusing on getting rid of all this merch, because we set up for merch thinking that the album, I mean, it's better to be safe than sorry, but we bought like 50 shirts in preparation for the album launch, and we sold a good chunk of them, but we were just like, okay, maybe we'll be able to move all of them once COVID's over, and COVID still ain't fucking over. So we got to move these shirts, and then that's pretty much it. I mean, like our next big plan was that split, and as soon as that split happens, like we may or may not tour with those guys too.
Cool.
Because like we had a out to California and then wrap around back to Texas tour plan, where we stopped in like Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and all that stuff. And whatever. Anyway, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no.
I'm so sorry that this interview has gone all over the
honestly,
place, man.
like some of the times when I I have a plan, and sometimes it's better just to rock with it. And I love some of the tangents that we got to go down, like talking about the lights conspiracies and all that, like that. All that stuff is really, really fun. So I'm glad that we got to jam on here. Gabe, the last question that I ask all my guests is a favorite Mosh story that they would like to share to kind of end things off. And I'm sure you've listened enough that it's literally whatever is the first thing to your mind. Doesn't need to be anything related to you or the band. So what do you got for us?
well, it's kind of like two stories that like fused like seconds apart from each other.
Oh, okay.
So it was at the A Different Shade of Blue tour last year. When Stick to Your Guns and all those guys, it was like See You Space Cowboy, Stick to Your Guns, Knocked Loose, and Candy, and I don't know what the death metal band was called, and Rotting Out were all playing together. So like when Knocked Loose was playing, there's like a lot, by no means am I knocking this, but Knocked Loose has like a lot of like generic kind of like dad metal fans.
Sure.
And so some of those dudes were like push moshing really hard. And there was like some asshole like college frat dude that was tall as fuck, super fucking ripped, just fucking like, look like clearly like some type of college sport frat guy, whatever. And he had his shirt off. And I don't know what the fuck it is about like messing with straight edge kids in Texas, but like pretty much every show I go to, somebody sees like the X's on my hands or they'll see my X on my arm, and then they'll come up to me and like shake me from behind. And
Oh,
that shit
what?
pisses me off. Yeah, and like it pisses me off so fucking much. And I'm just like, I don't like no, like don't touch me, okay? Like if you hit me while we're marching, fine, but like don't fucking touch me
Don't
if I don't know you.
rattle.
So
I'm
this,
not a rattle dog.
yeah,
Like, fuck off.
yeah. So he like grabbed and he was doing that to me, and then what song was it? I think they were playing "In the Walls," and like as soon as it was like I'll hide you in my walls, and and then as soon as like that breakdown, and I just and clapped him right in the fucking face, like
Oh,
like flat hand right in the fucking nose and mouth, and I broke his nose,
oh, fuck.
and it just fucking like just shit everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
this dude was way bigger than me, and like as soon as I clapped him, I expected him to hit me back, and like I look behind me, doesn't do shit. His girlfriend's like, "Oh my god," and he's like, "Ah," and I felt bad about it, but like fuck him, like don't fucking touch me, dude. Like,
Yeah.
and then when they closed the set with like Dead Ringer and Counting Worms,
Mhm.
like the crowd was so fucking nuts on like with crowd surfing and doing like grabbing the mic and all that shit that I got stuck on the stage for the like those two songs, and I couldn't get off the stage just because like there was a whole bunch of like the side that I was stuck on was like a whole bunch of teenage girls, and like
Oh, right.
I'm
They're not in the mindset to push back. They just push
yeah,
forward.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I've seen
like
that too many
I'm
times.
like I'm like a little over 5'10", and like I weigh like 190, 200 pounds, somewhere in that range, whatever. So I mean, these are a whole bunch of like teenage girls clearly in high school. I'm not gonna fucking stage dive on them and like this because like
Yeah.
when I stage dive, I do the thing where you like throw your shoulder forward and you like kick your legs over.
Yeah.
And I
The
was
tuck
wearing,
and
and
roll. Yeah.
yeah. So, and I'm wearing docks, so I'm not gonna fucking like clop these teenage girls in the fucking head with my docks. So I got stuck on the stage, and like the security guard was like, "Yo, get off the stage," and I was like, "Bro, fuck you!" Like, you see this shit? And he's like, "Okay." And so I got to watch the end of like the coolest set I've ever seen at a hardcore show in my fucking life
Mm.
on stage with the band. And like that was just like the coolest fucking thing ever. And then like for some of the promotion videos that were done of that set, you can see me like moshing and doing like stage flips and all this other shit. And so I don't know, that's probably my coolest mosh story, is being able to
Yeah.
just have those two things happen like literally minutes apart from each other at like
Yeah.
my most favorite show ever.
So the thing
So
that we've learned from these stories is don't grab anyone for any reason at a hardcore show and shake them unless they're your homie and you're excited. That's really it.
yeah,
Um,
that's
full stop.
acceptable.
Yeah, that's
Don't touch
acceptable.
anybody else though.
Well, Gabe, this has been a really, really fun conversation with you. It's cool to hear some of the unexpected connections between yourself and some of the things around, Calgary hardcore and just Canada as well. Any other things that you want to plug, shout out? The floor is yours for whatever you want to send the people off with.
Yeah, just all of our friend bands. So Buried But Still Breathing, Behind Colored Glass, Second Wind, Recon. I'm actually friends with the Recon guys now. Those super cool dudes, especially John, the bass player, super fucking nice guy. Antagonist AD, because I'm friends with all those guys, love them to death and always will. Exile, their side project, and I don't know, just I guess mortality rate, because those guys are tight as fuck.
Yeah,
So kudos to them, and thank you so much for like having us on,
of
or having
course.
me on. I didn't really expect this interview to happen to begin with, and then when it did happen, uh despite technical difficulties, we got it figured out. And then for it to just be such a relaxed interview, you know, it wasn't like real like, okay, what are you doing in the next 3 months, or what are your, you know, Spotify listens versus your Bandcamp listens, you know, like it wasn't anything crazy like that. So, you know, it makes me really happy that all that stuff was going on. And last one I want to give is my friend Courtney. If it wasn't for her telling me her account of her sexual assault, I wouldn't have been able to write our final song that had Sam Crocker on it, and kind of come to terms with my sexual assault from when I was a teenager. And it just kind of like, the two stories just kind of like overlapped in regards to how we felt about it. And it like meant so much to be able to do that with an artist that I care about, and then also get a message out about coping with it and feeling pissed off about it and all the other natural feelings, and then being able to incorporate the little side stuff of like Texas being like David Koresh was in the music video. Like we had like sound clips of David Koresh talking and all this other stuff. And because she's from Waco, and I, you know, a lot of us have played up in Waco and all this other shit. So if it wasn't for Courtney, that song wouldn't have happened. So big shout out to my friend Courtney. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we've left it all on the table here, Gabe, and I appreciate, you know, the kind words just on you know, my involvement with, you know, this podcast. A goal of mine is not to just be like build it up to this thing and then only talk to like, you know, the big wigs in hardcore. Like I really believe that you know, I have a responsibility and a platform to shout out bands that I fuck with and appreciate. And I'm glad that we got to officially meet for the first time. And I am very much looking forward to the day where either I'm down in Texas filming something, or you're up here playing a show and me filming it, and we get to officially meet for the first time. So
yeah, I mean, fingers crossed we get to kick it.
Yeah,
I really hope so.
Everyone wear a mask, do your damn, you know, do your part.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Wash
all
your
that
ass.
stuff. Wash your ass. Well, Gabe, again, thanks for coming on and jamming with me. This has been a blast.
For sure. See you around, man.